subject who had lived in Bermuda for 3 years. Newly enfranchised Bermudians immediately put their power to work. 1963 was an election year, and with it came the formation of Bermuda's first official political party, the Progressive Labour Party, which picked up 6 seats in the new parliament. 1 year later, the United Bermuda Party was formed in response to the PLP. Its leader was Jack, later Sir Henry Tucker, who realized early that change was inevitable and that ruling whites could survive only by sharing power.
Jack Tucker appreciated the pressure for change that was coming and decided that Bermuda would be best off if it accepted it. Bermuda was then on the brink of starting the exempted company business, which has become so important to us today. It was also important that the burgeoning tourist business not be interrupted by civil strife, which almost certainly would have occurred. And so I think he took the pragmatic point of view that Bermuda should go forward to universal adult suffrage.
These were exciting times for politicians. Representatives of both parties met in London to initiate a new constitution, which came into effect in 1967, abolishing the plus vote, a clause which gave property holders an extra vote in elections. The following year, Bermudians voted in the first general election contested by political parties, in which the UBP established control of the House of Assembly. Under the new constitution, Sir Henry Tucker became Bermuda's first government leader. He would hold that post for 3 years before retiring, to be replaced by the island's first black government leader, Sir Edward Richards. This was also a turbulent period for industrial relations. Tensions had been running high for years, and angry workers came close on several occasions to flare-ups with the police. Then in 1965, the anger boiled over during a bitter labor dispute about union representation of the Bermuda Electric Light Company. On February the 1st, in an astonishing outbreak of violence, 17 policemen were injured in a bloody clash with picketers. It was the lowest point in Bermuda's labor relations history. Disputes aside, Bermuda's economy was doing well. After the war, the island turned again to tourism, promising a unique slice of British serenity just a short hop from America. Wartime military service had claimed many of Bermuda's regular cruise ships, but the door was now open for a boom in arrivals by air. In 1946, the first commercial flights were allowed at the Kindley Field military base, and they quickly overtook the older, slower flying boat connections to Darrell's Island. By the 50s and 60s, tourism was in full swing, pumping money into the local economy and creating many jobs. Most visitors were from the eastern seaboard of the United States, but tourists from further afield began taking advantage of new air services to Bermuda, and arrivals' numbers soared. The Civil Air Terminal, later renamed Bermuda International Airport, was revamped and extended to meet the demand. Eventually, cruise ship fleets were again built up and began a boom period of their own. After the mid-1960s, when tourist arrivals had already passed 200,000 a year, large new hotels like the Southampton Princess sprang up to meet the demand. American students from East Coast colleges also visited in their thousands during the spirited annual college weeks. For many, it was their first experience of Bermuda, and they liked the holiday island so much they returned for honeymoons and regular family vacations. With the rise in tourism, Bermuda's businesses flourished. Local merchants enjoyed a heyday supplying the visitors' needs, and local banks prospered by servicing the merchants. The Bank of Bermuda and the Bank of N.T. Barterfield developed into powerful institutions and began opening offices in overseas markets like Europe and the Far East. The Bermuda Commercial Bank, which originated as a retail bank, now caters solely to international business. At home, money was on everyone's minds in 1970, when the island went over to decimal dollars. The old British system of pounds, shillings and pence was dropped and replaced with Bermuda's first currency of its own. With prosperity came a new responsibility towards Bermuda's heritage and the arts. The Bermuda National Trust was set up in 1970 to safeguard open spaces and the island's unique architecture. A summer performing arts festival was launched by the Bermuda Arts Council, giving way in the mid-70s to an international winter program, the Bermuda Festival, which still enjoys great success today. There was also renewed responsibility for the environment, with the government acting to prevent overfishing and damage to the coral reef. MPs were following a long tradition of concern for Bermuda's nature. As early as 1903, Bermudian and American scientists set up a biological station in Flats Village at the old Frascati Hotel. Over the years, many famous scientists carried out their work either in Bermuda or its surrounding waters. Dr. William Beebe spent many years in Bermuda and used the island as a base for studying marine life, and for his record-breaking bathysphere dive in 1934, half a mile beneath the surface. Unfortunately, no scientist was able to predict the catastrophic scale insect blight which began decimating Bermuda's cedar trees in the 1940s. Within a few years, most of the island's cedars were destroyed. A tragic end to the trees which gave us speedy ships and shaped so much of Bermuda's character. Thankfully, the cedar is today making a brave comeback, thanks to careful planting of scale-resistant trees. A great cause of celebration came in 1951, when the Bermuda cahao, thought to be extinct, was found living in the isolated islands of Castle Harbour. Just 10 years later, biologist David Wingate set up the Nonsuch Island Nature Reserve to study and protect not only the cahao, but all of Bermuda's wildlife, a living laboratory of the island's indigenous flora and fauna. Nonsuch has remained an essential oasis for nature against the problems of the modern world. Back at the biostation, now a world-class research facility at Ferry Reach, teams have carried out many innovative programs over the years. Among them, a project to monitor the health of Bermuda's coastal areas and another to study the circulation of the world's oceans. March 1973. Governor Sir Richard Sharples and his ADC, Captain Hugh Sayers, were brutally assassinated in the grounds of Government House, stunning an island so unused to violent crime. 2 men were convicted in the murders and 3 other killings. And in 1977, having exhausted their appeals, they were hanged within 30 minutes of each other at Casemates Prison. The backlash was swift and catastrophic.
Hamilton is slowly but surely taking on the look of a war zone. In the background now we see the Sunshine Company here on Woodbourne Avenue, and it's completely gutted by fire.
The Premier, David Gibbons, later Sir David, appealed for calm.
We must work together to maintain law and order. We must work together to remove any causes which may have contributed to our present problems. Violence of any kind cannot be tolerated or condoned.
A state of emergency was declared. 250 British troops, hardened by riot control in Northern Ireland, were flown in to restore order. Bermuda began counting the physical and social cost.
I'm speaking today to all Bermudians. Our country is passing through a time of deep anxiety, a time when people are clearly apprehensive about what might happen and perhaps fearful that malign influences could be let loose among us to spread bitterness and division.
The violence abated, but in 1981 there was more labor strife, with the BIU calling a general strike over pay. The union won increases averaging 20%, but by the time the 1-month strike was over, just 1,200 tourists remained in Bermuda.
The struggles that we went through, like the Belco, like the 1981 general strike, like many other flare-ups and many other sit-ins and all the rest of it. And there is a famous writer who's always said, the struggle shall continue. And in my life's experience, I've seen that the struggle is never over with, but the struggle has always been worthwhile.
Despite its troubled years, Bermuda had entered a settling down period that heralded the prosperity of the modern era. As ever, seafarers made the island an important port of call, their traditional way station for transatlantic voyages. Spectacularly, the island played host 3 times to the tall ships race in the 60s, 70s and 80s, when hundreds of vessels brought a parade of sail to local waters. The 1976 event was especially grand, with 4,000 sailors in 90 ships honoring the United States' 200th anniversary. Over the years, loftier visitors confirmed Bermuda's role as a meeting place for world leaders. In the 40s, Allied leaders came here to decide the boundaries of the post-war world. In the 60s, statesmen like John F. Kennedy made an appearance. And in the 80s, British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher held talks here with US President George Bush on German reunification. Tourism continued to boom, and in the mid-80s reached its record peak of 650,000 arrivals per year, more than 10 times the local population. Not only tourists were visiting the island. Since the 1930s, Bermuda had become increasingly attractive to international businesses seeking an offshore location.
The origins or beginning of the international insurance industry in Bermuda, the establishment of American International's international headquarters in Bermuda by C.B. Starr in 1947, who was the founder of American International Group, AIG, and also one of the greatest entrepreneurs in the insurance industry. It began the growth of a significant business here in Bermuda.
By the mid-60s and 70s, foreign corporations were establishing subsidiaries to take advantage of Bermuda's no-tax environment. Bermuda's status as a leading international business center was confirmed in the 90s with the arrival of big cat catastrophe reinsurance companies, which brought with them billions of dollars of capital. As Bermuda matured, moves were made to improve the education system to provide a more skilled and eloquent workforce. The school leaving age was raised to 16. Schools were finally integrated, and in 1974, existing post-secondary institutes and the Sixth Form Center were amalgamated as the Bermuda College. It opened at Prospect, abandoned 17 years earlier by the British Army, before moving to its present Stonington campus. There was even more change to come. In the early 90s, after much debate, the school system was restructured into primary and middle schools and 2 senior secondary schools, Berkeley Institute and the newly built Cedar Bridge Academy. The island's healthcare was upgraded with massive spending at the King Edward VII Memorial Hospital. There are new operating rooms, breast screening and CAT scan systems, a recompression chamber for divers, and after a surge in AIDS patients in the 80s, a hospice at Agape House. Contemporary Bermuda has also proved fertile ground for confident and powerful women. Half of Bermuda's 35,000 jobs are held by females who have made great inroads in private and public life, particularly in politics. Marjorie Bean became the first woman member of the Legislative Council and was rewarded with the title of Dame, as was former PLP leader Dame Lois Brown Evans, the first woman to head a political party. Pamela Gordon, daughter of E.F. Gordon, became Bermuda's first female premier after the UBP MPs elected her their leader in 1997. And in the last general election of the century, in November 1998, Jennifer Smith became premier after the PLP's first victory at the polls. But as ever in Bermuda's checkered story, there have been setbacks or opportunities, depending on whom you ask. The Canadian base closed in 1994, followed the next year by HMS Malabar, when the Royal Navy completed its withdrawal from Bermuda, recalling its handful of remaining liaison officers. Also in 1995, the US naval facility in the East End was shut down. Thousands of American servicemen pulled out, leaving the airport and base lands in Bermudian hands, a full 10% of Bermuda's landmass. How to use this windfall is just one of the many questions facing islanders today. Bermuda has come a long way in its first 4 centuries of human habitation. The island has become a powerhouse of drive and ambition. Yet it is challenged by new social problems like overcrowding, noise pollution, drug abuse, and some say runaway success. As we enter the new century, we must ask, just where and how far are we going? Year 2000. As with any milestone, many around the world are looking for a fresh start, a new beginning. They are expecting change. And what of Bermuda, now almost 400 years into its human history? Today, as the island takes its place in the modern world, Bermudians can thank centuries of innovation and adaptation, much of it in the last century, and even more within living memory. Modern Bermuda enjoys a position and lifestyle envied by much of the world. Incomes are high, even for entry-level jobs. Social conditions are good, education opportunities and health outstrip much of the world, and the future continues to look promising. Bermuda is on the verge of unprecedented economic growth, thanks to a soaring insurance market and the emerging promise of electronic commerce and telecommunications. The latest boom began in the early 90s, when the island's insurance market exploded thanks to the arrival of the so-called big cats, the catastrophe reinsurance firms.
The success of ACE and XL and several companies that followed in the insurance segment was followed on by using Bermuda as a solution to a crisis that evolved in the reinsurance industry in the early 90s, particularly with the Hurricane Andrew event in South Florida, which caused about $20 billion in damage and created huge deficits for the worldwide insurance and reinsurance community. Again, there was a big shortfall of capacity, and Bermuda looked like the best place for this solution to be developed. About $5 billion in capital came into Bermuda in the space of a year and a half in the 92-93 period, which was a hugely significant event in development of the island's further prominence in the insurance and reinsurance industry.
Business Bermuda was off and running. The reinsurance market mushroomed, praised by some as the world's most progressive and innovative. Suddenly, an island of peaceful pink beaches and relaxed tourists was filled with an army of scurrying business people. Islanders stepped forward to service the wealthy newcomers. Everyone from contractors and office suppliers to banks, accountancy and legal firms, hotels, communications companies and travel agents. With so many opportunities, Bermuda has long suffered from a labor shortage, particularly in jobs requiring special skills. For many years, the gaps were filled by expatriate workers, mainly from Britain, Canada and the United States. But today, there are also opportunities for talented young Bermudians.
We are on our second or third generation of indigenous talent. Many of us have formed to provide scholarships to send people abroad to study, particularly the College of Insurance in New York. And now we are a worldwide base in Bermuda with operations in London and New York, the places where we first competed. We are now part of those markets too, which gives us a broader platform which to train our Bermudian talent so that our Bermuda talent can compete in a worldwide stage.
At last count, more than 2,600 Bermudians were working in the international business sector. That figure is expected to rise, although the road is not always an easy one.
One of the interesting things about Bermuda right now, as we talk about our economic success, is that a lot of young black Bermudians in particular feel that they're not a part of the success of the insurance industry. I happen to know that there are a lot of white and Portuguese Bermudians who feel the same way. And that's not surprising because, indeed, to become an underwriter, for example, one has to work in a number of different companies in the U.S., either as brokers or as underwriters, gain a lot of experience, gain a lot of contacts, and then to be successful, one draws upon those contacts in negotiating deals. To become an actuary, that also is a long haul, and there are very few Bermudian actuaries. And the underwriters and the actuaries ultimately are the people who make the decisions and who are the leaders in the insurance industry. So it is not possible for a large number of Bermudians to actually become the leaders in that field. So it's not surprising that people are feeling a bit alienated.
Construction, too, has boomed as international companies scramble to build lavish new office space for their businesses. For the old mainstay of tourism, the news has not been so good. Once the jewel in Bermuda's crown, tourism today is suffering from a 20-year slump and shows few signs of a turnaround. Since the heyday of the 70s and early 80s, Bermuda's visitor numbers have fallen dramatically, due largely to competition from less expensive destinations and a trend towards more varied vacation experiences.
I'd like people to understand that that profitable engine of international business is built on a foundation of tourism, and we cannot any longer allow that foundation to erode. It is eroding, and if it collapses, the profitable international business sector will soon find Bermuda no longer an attractive place to do business.
Worse still, visitors are spending less than their predecessors, putting critical pressure on some Bermudian businesses. Almost everyone has felt the effect, from hotels and restaurants to taxi drivers and shopkeepers. Some merchants have had to drastically change the way they do business or close shop altogether.
We've seen an increase in things like catalog shopping, internet shopping, and shopping by Bermudians traveling overseas. So not only are the tourist customers declining in number, but at the same time, the local customer base is doing more of its shopping in other locations.
But might there be a silver or even a silicon lining to this particular economic cloud? We live in the age of the internet, where email and the World Wide Web have changed everything. The way we do business, the way we shop and go to school, the way we communicate with old friends and meet new ones. Suddenly, e-commerce is the new buzzword, so much so that some predict it will become the next pillar of Bermuda's economy.
Bermuda's not going to escape it. We're not going to go back to the days of horse-drawn carriages. And so it is really important that we think carefully about how we ensure that all of Bermuda feels that it can access this new economy. And the work on the e-commerce advisory board really is to help advise the minister of telecommunications on e-commerce of how to ensure that we have people who are educated, that we have people who are educated not just about technology, but also about entrepreneurship.
Once again, Bermuda finds itself ideally placed to help that happen. With new e-commerce legislation, an offshore location, and benevolent tax status, Bermuda is fast becoming a headquarters for e-commerce companies. Giant telecommunications firms are also staking a claim here, some planning extensive fiber optic cables to wire the world for the digital age.
November 9, 1998 has indeed been a date with destiny for Bermuda.
Monday, November 9th, 1998, marked a watershed in Bermuda's political history. In the final general election of the 1900s, Progressive Labour Party ended 30 years of United Bermuda Party rule, storming to a 26-14 landslide victory and claiming 54% of the national vote. No one could deny Bermudians were eager for a fresh start. While old doors were closing and new doors opening in the economic sector, the desire for change was in the air. The island was bathed in the party atmosphere, but before long it was back to business as usual. And for the new government, party politics aside, there are many new challenges to face. Bermuda may be on a fast-forward road to prosperity, but some are asking, at what cost? Bermuda may have plenty of jobs, high incomes, and an abundance of material treasures, but the island must suffer the byproducts of those successes too.
Because we need to be honest, we have adopted lifestyles that are not exactly Bermudian. We've adopted consumption habits that are more akin to those found in North America and Western Europe. We commonly rely on the motor vehicle, the car, instead of the ferry. And we essentially are not taking care with the ways in which we dispose of our waste, both human and non-human.
Some warn that many young Bermudians are missing out on the prosperity around them. There are less obvious issues too, such as Bermudianization of commerce and industry, the age-old problem of entrenched racism.
In the past, black people's concerns, their histories, their stories are very much marginalized by lots of things. For example, curriculum in schools, stories in the media, and obviously talk about their political and social condition. And over the years, this has obviously changed. Nowadays, people are talking more openly about these issues, especially about race, for example. I think it's a much healthier way to go. People, neither black nor white people, feel obliged to pretend anymore that there is an issue. And that in itself has lessened the tension about the issue. And it's healthy.
Bermuda must also deal with the shortage of affordable housing, caused partly by overcrowding as the flourishing economy attracts more and more people.
We're looking at, a market where prices are going up because demand for property is exceeding supply, and that's pretty well true across the board. Doesn't worry anybody that that's true across the board. Where it does